Hi guys, welcome to this short 30 minutes webinar out of Copenhagen. I'm Finn from AXcademy. On the program today, we've got the new Dynamics 365 Finance features due this summer, or some of them. In the headlines, we got improvements for the cash flow forecast. We got things about the enhanced functionality in the core financials, and there's even more. So let me just turn the slides just a little bit. And as always, we have a question and answer session at the end. If you've got any questions, please feel free to post them throughout the webinar in the chat box, and I will have a look at them when we get closer to the finish. Today, I got Alison with me to help doing things in the chat box if you got any trouble with the sound, or otherwise would like to get some help. So covered today is the improvements to the cash flow forecast, a bit about the, as mentioned, core functionality, AI and automation is just a little bit of mentioning that, and some new globalization features. There's a bunch of those. So what I did was I was trying to reorganize it to make it more sensible to me, at least, perhaps to you as well. So the presentation order is going to be core financials, financial insights, once again, just a quick overview, a bit about globalization, public sector, just worth mentioning, there was a thing happening in there, and then from some other domains, which I think would be interesting for you working with financials to know about project operations. I know, but project operations and supply chain management as well. So first, a little bit of text from Microsoft themselves, a little bit about the release wave 1, 2021 release wave 1, and then I guess we will have, as usual, release wave 2 in the fall, a bit late perhaps, as this one was as well. So a lot more about automation and trying to help, and one of the things that I highlighted in here was the thing about preview. There's quite a lot of preview things in there. And as you might know, some of the things are in here for preview for ages, really. Some of the things which came out in 2019 are still kind of preview in here. So preview might not mean it's kind of ready, but maybe that Microsoft wants to test the waters with some of the things and wants to get your opinion about things in here. And Microsoft actually does pay attention. It's not like in the good old days. They actually do pay attention to the things that pop into the ideas portal, as they proudly mention in this release wave as well. So out of the box, machine learning, some of the things which I'm kind of proud of is that the system is trying to get more clever, trying to help us focus on the things where we can't help, so it can help us with predictions, automations, including doing budgets, cash flow forecast, and predicting when customers are going to pay, which, well, they hopefully are. So predictive things underway in this, automations, and as I mentioned several times with finance, also doing these webinars, a lot of things about collection enhancements and automations as well. But do note the preview, that this with the preview means that it might not be finalized, for a long time, but give it a go as far as you can. And the reason that I mentioned as far as you can is that some of the things you cannot switch on yourself. You know, we've got feature management, which will take care of most of the things. We have to once in a while get to the license configuration, you know, put the stuff into maintenance mode so we can change the license configuration, go back live. But there are a couple of things in there where you have to say please to Microsoft before you can actually get to it. And actually, that's one of the most exciting features, not that you have to say please, but one of the most exciting features that we have added this time around between supply chain management and finance, you actually have to say please. It's brand new and it's a fabulous feature. I think I haven't yet had my hands on, but I got a few slides about it later on. So let's get to the facts in here, the core financials, where we got 7 things, and I have decided to focus on a few of those. Instead of sort of spreading all over the place, focus on some of the most important things that there is, and just worth mentioning that one of the features that have been added is the wizard. You can see that there is a wizard mentioned on the first line in here with the adjustment wizard for asset leases, which is a nice feature, actually. The wizards have been polished, so now they look more like the rest of the Dynamics 365. Not finance and operations, but the guys on the other side, the CE Dynamics 365. But the three things I would like to present in slightly more detail is the budget plan, right? So it's storytelling kind of thing, but it's nice that it's going to be in here, and you have to have a little bit of look for it to actually know where it's working. Maybe you don't work with budget plans at all, but if you do, I think you would find this nice. However, not a big thing. The project integration is a bigger thing, I would say, and that leads me to talk a bit about project management and accounting, or project operations, or what's Microsoft up to actually about that. Not turning this into anything about project operations, but I just want you to know, as some of us are a bit confused about Microsoft plans and what they've been doing, what it is. And I'll take the opportunity to spend a couple of minutes on project operations while I get to this cash flow forecasting project integration. And then there is another thing which I like very much. Some of you who've been with me before would know that I appreciate very much when we try to integrate things, when we like to cooperate, and the vendor collaboration is cooperation, and now more things have been added to the vendor collaboration workspace, or workspaces, I should say, because I think it's 4 that we have in here. And what I'm going to show you today is vendor information, or vendor collaboration information workspace in there, where we've got the bank changes, and there's also, in fact, another thing about category requests, things about the asset book and so on. They will have to mention. So just a box popping in, but let's move on to the first detail that I'm going to show you in here. When we work with budget plans, it's a fairly comprehensive feature. That's the reason why I put the kind of mind map, the illustration in the upper right-hand corner, just to remind those of you who haven't seen so much about budget plan, there's a bunch of functionality in there. And that also means that there could be a little bit of confusion. And when somebody submits a budget plan with all the budget figures of whatever the storytelling is going to be, that the storytelling itself is missing. And that's why Microsoft this time around has added, you could give an introduction to why you're doing a thing like this. And so when you publish these budgets in here, then you can tell what it is, when it's from the headquarters, and then it's being distributed to the business unit departments or whatever, or it sort of comes back and being aggregated back to the headquarters. You could write some content, some additional information for this in here. So what you could do in here is have some information being formatted as well. So long story made short, I just want to show you what it looks like. If you have switched this feature on, then you get to the budget plan and you get to the header, because this is where it is. It's not on the lines, it's on the header. And then you got what you can see is pretty much well, if you switched it on, that's another feature you had to switch on, that you want to use an advanced, the most current HTML editor, then you get the looks like that. So there's actually 2 things in there that I did. I said, A, I like to use this budget plan narrative, and B, I also want to use the recent most HTML editor. Both of these features are on to get the screenshot that you see right now. So on the budget plan, not much to it, it's just a header basically in here. I can now see when I'm on the budget plan header, I can then see got the possibility on a new fast tab. I can then see the budget plan narrative, and then I could see I would like to do a summary description or whatever I'm going to do. Not huge, but a good thing, I think. Budget planning is fairly confusing quite often, especially if you don't give an explanation. Why did you do a thing like that? Then it could be like. So what you need to do, you need to get to the feature management, switch on the, in order to do the cash flow forecasting and the project integration. That was a new topic, sorry. In the cash flow forecasting project integration, in order to make this work, you have to get to feature management and then switch this on. And that means you can now include projected cost and revenues in the cash flow forecast. And that means if you turn this feature on, that means that on the cash flow forecasting setup, you now got a new tab, the one that you can see right now on this screen. And on that, you can then set up what you want to include. And one of the things that you have to think about is then what kind of project forecast model you're going to use. So for reductions of things and other things as well. This is fairly nice detailed by Microsoft. So I would recommend you, if you're working with projects, to have a look at this in here. The cash flow forecast has come a long way to be where it is right now. In the good old days with AX, it was, well, okay-ish, unless you want to do things with including budgets and so on, then it was kind of less okay. And then originally with the Dynamics 365 or AX7 or whatever it was, we didn't have cash flow, and now it's in here, and it sort of came back with a vengeance. There's lots of things in here and improvements happening. Mind you that you don't necessarily have to use this to include the budgets, but this allows you to use the most features in here. So if you're working with projects and you want to see a predictable cash flow as reliable as possible, I recommend you to have a look at this. There's more things that you have to consider, you know, the liquidity accounts and so on. And then I mentioned this about project operations, or is it project management accounting, or what is it? I've been fairly confused since last year, or was it the year before, about this, what was going to happen. I'm still a bit confused about what's going to happen, but I understand more about what it is these days. Project management accounting is still around. Just last week, we did a full week training course for a customer in Denmark in the Dynamics 365 Finance Operations module, Project Management and Accounting. The project operations is not finance operations, or is it? It really depends on who you ask. But what is it then? If you ask Microsoft, what is project operations then? It's a combination of the PSA module, which is, I think they're still selling it. They're going to quit that, and then it's going to be sort of phased out later on. It's a project for the web, and then it is good old Dynamics 365 Finance or Finance Operations, if you prefer. But where do you do what? Because project operations is an app which is part of, to me at least, the things about Dataverse and CE, customer engagements, still referred to by some, including me, as CRM. But where do you do what then? Well, if you have a look at this slide, maybe you'll know a little bit more about that, and then I'll get back to core finance. If we're using the light scenario, Microsoft is talking about 3 scenarios. If we use the light scenario, we don't work in finance operations at all. We work in the project operations app using Dataverse. If we're using scenario number 2, or the scenario resource and non-stock items, then we use a combination. Some of the things are done, maybe you could say the initial things are done in project operations, and the rest of the things which are blue on my illustration here, are done in finance operations. You're still scratching a few heads around, including here, when and if all the things that we could do in finance operations are ever going to show up in the project operations app, because it's fairly complex. That's the reason why it takes like 5 full days to understand everything in there. So when is it going to happen? We don't know. Microsoft can't tell. It's going to be challenging. And then that leads us to the third of the implementation scenarios. And that's where everything happens in good old finance operations. So if you're going to do things in projects with stock or production-based stuff, then you'll work in finance operations. And finance operations entirely can't start in project operations and then continue in finance operations if it is about stocked or production-based stuff. These are the 3 implementation scenarios. But then please remember that some of these things which Microsoft is adding right now They work both in project operations app and in the finance operations, project management and accounting module. I'm certainly looking forward to see what's going to happen, and we start delivering training also in project operations soon. We still do it, and our training materials all of a sudden become popular when it dawned on people, including ourselves, that the scenario 3 is actually the finance operations module. So we got those training materials, we got some on-demand courses as well for that. Another feature that was added, and I think I mentioned already that I really like the things about cooperation, making things easier for us and for the vendors, collaborating on some of the collaboration workspaces, and this is one of them, the vendor information one. What I put down in here is the additional details on a given vendor, the CN one in a consortium Asia. And on this, you can see there is bank information at the bottom. And if you watch carefully, maybe some of you could see that there is a new thing in here called the category request. These things are new, or the category request is something that the vendor could, if they already do work with those some things, they could ask about the category. That's more like supply chain management. But the bank information is new. So what could happen is that the vendor suggests us to pay using a new bank account. That makes things more safe. When you send off new bank details to one of your customers, the customer quite often says, is that really you changing your bank account, or is it some other things going on? So if you're using the safe environment on the Dynamics 365 and the vendor themselves, they request a change, then you got a safe environment to do the things in here. And this is, if I then went to the workspace in here and I had a look at the bank information, I could see all the details of the requested bank changes, whether it was me as the customer with this vendor, or it was the vendor who requested the changes in here, and then see the story, the originator, and other things too. And I've also got a new list page, a new inquiry, you could call it, or the reports in here, as you can see on the navigation path. I got a new inquiry to see what's up in here. Any new vendors been asking me to approve new bank details as well. Making things easier, I would say, and that's a headline for the next thing as well. And this is just going to be headlines, no details involved in here with these insights. But it's about cash flow, or making it easier to predict the cash flow intelligently. Well, even. So once again, it's about customer payment predictions. It's now possible to include external data, which I think is really nice, either by importing or entering external data. If you've got some sources you want to correct by using some payment plans that you got an Excel spreadsheet, we still can't live without Excel spreadsheets, I guess. So we could have external data also involved in our cash flow forecasting in here. You could forecast some bank balances in here by seeing something about recurring payments and so on, and also have intelligent budget proposals. The Treasury Workspace is a new one popping up in here, and we'll have a look at that later on. The big thing with this update is about globalization. Huge features like the supply chain management. There's not too many of those, depending on who you are, but globalization makes life easier for a lot of us working on international projects where we have to do a lot of things ourselves because Microsoft is not ready, whatever happened. Now, these days, we've got a lot of things working electronically. We've got electronic reporting and other things too. And Microsoft is constantly adding more things on the general level so we could easier work with the international details. I think that this release makes the international life on a project much easier. So what's the reason for that? Not just because of the localization for Egypt, but because of, let's see the sentence in here, ship the general, I'm not going to read that aloud. It's fairly long, isn't it? But I've got another slide for mentioning some of these things. So what I'd like to tell you about in here is primarily the global withholding tax. I've listed all the other things in here, but it's really too much to start babbling about these. But overall, there's now some global services, the global tax engines being made available. So basically, it is much easier to set up locally. There's lots of local things involved, and I'll show you, and you'll get that when you get the link to the presentations. You can read that for yourself, or of course, you can read about it on Microsoft's website. The global withholding tax. Withholding tax has been with us for a long time, and some of you would have met that if you ever participated in some of the certification exams. There's quite often a question about that, and lots of people never work with it because it was not required in their countries. Around Mediterranean it is, in the US, and in other places as well. Now, that was sort of prepared individually per country from Microsoft. And now it's a global engine in here that allows us to do that, and not just on the vendor level where it was before, but now it can be calculated at the item level. It's an option, so you could do it not just on vendors but on customers too. You could do it on the item level as well. Now, there's a couple of things you need to be aware of if you want to use that. So I've got a few slides in here about this. So you need to enable this in feature management. You then need to be aware of the legal entity and set up on the customers and vendors as well. And then if you want to do it on the release products, you need to set that up as well. But there is a little bit of a hidden thing. The first time I played around with this, I was a little bit surprised. I worked in a legal entity, working fine, I switched it on, and then I went to the general ledger parameters. I found a new tab in here, as you can see on the screen right now, withholding tax. I want to enable that, yeah, sure, and maybe I set up something about a minimum amount. And then I went to the next legal entity. Where's the tab? It's not in here. But I did switch on the feature. I did. But the fine print. The fine print is that you can't turn this global withholding tax on for countries or regions where Microsoft already did some localized solutions. And as you can see on the screen, that could be the US, and that's in fact the trouble here, and there are other countries too. So my US manufacturer is based in US, and that means that the global withholding tax is not an option in that legal entity. Be careful about that. But now, you know me, I'm very much into the user interface and making things easier for the users. So the next slide I've got in here is a combination of things. It shows you what it looks like with the global withholding tax set up on the release products, and I'm showing you saved views. I know, always babbling about saved views, but I want to point you to the features with the saved views per module that Microsoft includes in feature management. See how simple this one over here is. Well, first things first, the thing about the withholding tax, if I'm in, like I am right now, in the German legal entity, the German manufacturing DMF in the demo data, I have switched this on in the general ledger parameters, and I can then get to my release products. And when I get to my purchase tab, purchase fast tab, I should say, because we've got another one in the action tab. On the purchase fast tab, I can now see the calculate withholding tax and then the item withholding tax group. Now, see how simple this screen is, actually. We're used to see scores of fast tabs when we set up products. But this is a saved view, and it's an out-of-the-box saved view. Well, if you switch it on in feature management, because you can see at the top, it is called the Purchase Information Management. That's not a name that I gave it. I always call them AXcademy, right? But this one was out of the box from Microsoft. So apart from the standard view that you get, of course, always, then you can create your own ones, as always. And then if you switch on feature management for release products, for purchase orders, for planned orders, or whatever it would be, then you'll see some additions in here. And in this case, there was 4. I already had a look at 3. And then you can see the logistical information management has like a few lines on it to indicate this is new and you haven't seen it yet, Finn. And you can see on the padlock over here on the right-hand side, you can see that these are out of the box from Microsoft, and you can't modify those. If you want to change them, you have to save them under a new name. So once again, I can't really recommend enough the features with the saved views, and this was the saved views for the release products, and there are, I think, 10 different groupings over there. Saved view itself as a feature, and then the things about saved views in here. For your users, for yourself, quickly switch between what you want to do over here, and then you see different things on the action pane and different things in here with the fast tabs as well. Now, speeding up a little bit with the rest of the things in here, you can see I've lined up quite a lot of things, and you can read more about that in the release wave and then read more about that. There are exciting features in here, but the first thing you have to know there, and then you can start investigating more things about localization and so on. Public sector, just mentioning a little bit in here on the assets worked on by your customers. Why this is in public sector, I haven't got a clue, because I really think that it could be useful for lots of people, not just in the public sector. Okay, so this I mentioned also under supply chain management when I did a webinar, and if you care about the webinar for supply chain management similar to this one, you can find it on our website. Now, some news from other domains, supply chain management, but first a bit about the project operations. In this, there was a thing about the cash flow, just worth mentioning that in here. And in supply chain management, there's quite a few things affecting finance. So be aware of that, that even though Microsoft have listed them in the what's new for summer 2021 supply chain wave 1, then you should be aware of the global inventory accounting add-in. That's an exciting feature. And that's the one where you have to say, please. See, coming up soon. Rebate management is in here. There are things about the vendor submitted bank details. I mentioned that already. And then you could set up some default financial dimensions. And there's a brand new module, landed cost. Well, it's actually part of transportation management. And if you want to read more about these, find a blog post on our website, which has top 15, or is it 20? I don't know. But it's top features. Anyway, it has a link to the docs article at Microsoft if you want to read more. But the global inventory accounting, once again, global is one of my favorite things in Dynamics 365. It is for enterprise, right? Enterprises have lots of legal entities. They want to behave differently, but set up in sort of a standardized way. And this is what it allows you to do. Use some of the tools that we know about already with the calendars, the currency exchange rates, and then you got some conventions or policies where you can set up our policies that would be used across various legal entities. So have to ask about it from Microsoft, and since this is all brand new, I think they probably want to control who's let loose on this in here. Best of luck with that, but I really think this is kind of exciting. It's not available all over the world, and it doesn't cost anything extra. It's included in the license. That's sort of the fine print in here. So not all over the world, Europe and United Kingdom, and then not supported on-premise deployments. Okay. Rebate module was updated, true, and depending on who you are, you could consider this financial. And the landed cost module was the thing I mentioned before, where we got the transportation module, we got the landed cost module, landed cost predicting things coming in and so on. Kind of exciting feature, I think, for anyone working with the money stuff, being financial or being in supply chain management. Today is the big day where Microsoft changes their certification policy. So if you are very quick, you could just get in today, and then your certification is valid for 2 years if you pass. Otherwise, it's too late. Okay, before the question and answer session, let me just have a look at that over on in the chat box in just a sec. Before that, I just want to flash an exclusive offer today. No payment involved whatsoever. If you want to have a look at one of our sessions, what it looks like being part of our live online courses, or if you want to be in on-demand courses, follow the link in the chat that Alison is going to provide. And then for absolutely free, you can have a look at this lesson over here with yours truly, telling a bit about the foreign currency revaluation stuff, including the fairly new features in General Ledger, not the newest feature in General Ledger. There's still new things in there. Right, but follow the link in the chat, and if you care, then you could come back when curtain goes for a live online course end of August. Now, that was it. Let me just say if there are any questions over in the chat box. Any good reports about, I got a question about the vendor collaboration. Are there any good reports about how many has made the request? Not as I've seen yet. The only thing I've seen about the requests in here is that you got this list page where you can see the request being made. If there was any report, I don't know. I'll have a look, and then I will put my answer either in the presentation or answer you directly. Sustainability reports, not that I have noticed any additions to that, but that is an absolutely good question in here. The project integration for the cash flow, does it work when you run finance operations only in the classic project management and accounting? Well, I'm not an expert in project operations yet, working on that, but what I could see from the text in here, that it involves the project operations as well. No promises, though. I have to study that a little bit more, and that, of course, encourages me to get that. So, Erica, let me have a look at that, and then I could answer you either through the slide edition or directly to you. So thank you very much for that question too. You and Christina as well. Those were the questions that I saw in here. If the narration in the budget planning can be picked up by the centric, I don't know. And that was about it, I think. So sorry that I really couldn't give the answers, and there's always a lot of interesting things that could be asked about, and you did. So that would encourage me to have a look at this and then get back to answers next time we see, perhaps in here. We've got other webinars coming up. We haven't announced them yet. Keep an eye on them on our website, and perhaps sign up for a newsletter so you will be informed. Project operations, project management accounting is one coming up late August, early September. We've got warehouse management coming up as well. Got another ones in finance, and who knows, maybe the questions that we had at least about the project operations, we could discuss those in more details once we get to it. That was it. You can read more about the some of the new features in finance in the blog post that I did, and maybe also about supply chain management features as well. There's also a link, of course, to Microsoft where you can find a lot more details. Once again, I really like Microsoft becoming much better to document what actually happens in here. Still not perfect. That keeps us all busy. Okay, so thank you very much for today, and hope to see you next time we do a webinar at AXcademy. Keep your eyes open, sign up for the webinar, and perhaps we'll see you live in our finance class that we have at the end of August. Thank you very much for today. This was Finn from AXcademy out of Copenhagen. I wish you a pleasant, well, Northern Hemisphere summer and pleasant winter on the Southern Hemisphere. Cheers for now. Out of Copenhagen, this was Finn.